Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow podcast. I'm Patrick Van Straten. I'm back as always. And today I'm joined by Ravi Ramaneni once again. How are you, Ravi?
I'm good, Patrick. How are you doing?
I'm good. I've got my light on today, so I'm not as dramatically lit as last time. And thank you very much for stepping in today because Ted has been struck down by disease, but fortunately you're in perfect physical condition, clearly.
Yeah. And how about you? Have you stopped melting from the heat in London?
No. I'm pure liquid below the waist. That's how it feels at the moment. My loft is very hot, but I am quite pumped to talk about this today because we've got kind of a great lineup. I mean, like some of the names that were percolating earlier in the window have now come back in a somewhat serious capacity. And there are a few guys here who we've been looking to talk about for a while. So should we start off with Viktor Gyökeres, who is once again linked to Arsenal, linked to Chelsea, linked to everyone who needs a striker. Just turned 26. Obviously has excelled in the Championship. Obviously has excelled in the Portuguese league. Now could be heading back to the UK, and the price is pretty eye-watering. I think the buyout is 86 million, which is hefty.
It's very hefty. Yeah.
But he's a hefty boy. He's very big. If you were buying him by the pound, like at a steakhouse, then like that would probably be about the right price.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great way to put it. Very interesting career trajectory. I looked at him way back. Brighton bought him when he was, 19-year-old for $1 million from a Swedish second division team. And after a few loans, they sold him to Coventry. And I think for the first season, Coventry in 22-23, he had a really good season in Coventry for championship level. And curiously enough, usually what happens is when players pop up like that in championship, they usually get picked up by one of the Premier League teams. Instead, he got bought by Sporting Clube de Portugal for 24 million euros, probably around 20 million pounds, which was interesting. Like, I think that's number one for me. That was the one I was like, what? That's super strange because someone from outside, especially Portuguese league, affording this player for that price, and not a Premier League team picked him up. I think 20 million is pretty even in 22-23 is not that big of an amount for a striker who had a good season in the Championship. I looked at his numbers. And he did even better in the Portuguese league, and so like he's pretty much does the same thing what he's done in I'll go over that in a bit. His radar pretty much just inflated for the same kind of characteristics. And so what is he good at? For his height, he's I think 180. He's listed at 187. That's like 6'2", 6'3" ish, somewhere there. He's pretty good at carrying the ball and dribbling. And, he gets a lot of touches inside the box. Generally good quality shooting, especially last season in Portugal. And, his finishing numbers, like how many goals he scored, actually went up from the chances he had from Championship to Portugal. And he also has he's done a lot of really good at, finding his teammates to help them in terms of assists or expected assists. He was really good last season. And I looked into those. A lot of them are gets into the box, squares the ball off. He gets to the end line, cuts it back. Pretty good stuff. The other thing, though, on the negative side, he's not very strong aerially. For his height, I think it's pretty much that he really can't jump. I think that's going to be my biggest thing for his athleticism, if he's going to a Premier League team. And not to mention, if he's going into a top level Premier League team, or like top 5, top 6 type team, I think then another issue that he's going to face is that he's not very good at pressing. Okay. So I think teams have to, if you look at Arsenal, Chelsea, United, City, whoever, like all the top teams, they want their forward to press now, and forward to press and also drop a little deep to help build out and kind of rotate out wide or do a lot of things. Obviously, Haaland is a little different, but beyond that, I think all other teams want their forward to do more than just be a box presence and score. I think that to me, he seems to be someone that's most effective when he's inside the box, and his assist numbers and the way he assists goals. With my question marks around his athleticism, I don't think he'll get those opportunities in the Premier League. I think he'll be closed down pretty quickly. Like looking at how his acceleration burst, getting into the box, I think he's still very good at holding the ball up and just squaring the ball at the top of the box to a runner. I think he's good at that. He can still do those sort of things, but it does seem to me that he needs service, or he needs to be really close to the box to be very effective. And pressing, for me, I think that's probably what a lot of the top teams would look at and say, I'm not sure at 80 million or 65 million or 70 million that number, those things don't add up to me. That's what I've seen him.
I mean, I agree with a lot of that. And I didn't actually really think about the pressing side of it. What's interesting about him, I guess, is that he has kind of flexed between centre forward and wide player. Often a load of those assists, you expect to see this like right-footed shot monster playing off the left, cutting inside, but actually he's pulling out to the right a fair bit, and that's often when he's getting his assists. But on the other hand, came through the Championship, which is a good physical league. Like, it seems to be relatively good preparation for the Premier League. We've seen players translate from it. Certainly much better over the last 10 years than the 10 years before that. Then Portugal, okay, not the strongest league, but having succeeded in both and having had good numbers in the Europa League last season, does that give you your question marks here? Is it that you think there's bust potential, or do you just think that he's kind of like maybe a 10 to 15 goal striker being priced as a 20 to 25 goal striker?
I don't feel strongly that he would be a bust. I think he would be more on the lower side of goals, as you said. And it may not be a fair comparison. Like, if you look at Arsenal's Eddie Nketiah, in your view, how does he compare to Victor?
Well, I guess the Gyökeres is a much bigger, like, kind of physical specimen. He's obviously played out wide. I'd say that Nketiah, though he had a relatively dribbly season, the year before last, fundamentally he is just a guy who gets in the box and gets high XG shots. He's not particularly good at holding the ball up. He's not creative. He does work pretty hard. I don't know, really. I mean, they're quite different. I'm not convinced that he'd necessarily be better at getting those chances than Nketiah currently is, I guess is how I look at it. But I think I'm quite high on Nketiah relative to the Arsenal fan base.
Yeah, so for me, like, I compare them too, because I feel that if I envision his impact on a team, I think he won't be, especially the top 4, top 6 team. I don't see him, as you said, like as a 20-25 goal scorer. So I don't see him as an out-and-out starter. So, and if you look at Nketiah, the difference, I compared them to their numbers, obviously, not like a super deep dive, but I've done, just to compare how they grade out. Nketiah is a better presser. And, so to me, like, that would be the one I think modern teams want in this player. And so, and I think Victor definitely, I compared Victor's championship season and Nketiah's Premier League season last year. So that, it's probably more like, just to not comparing his Portugal season. I think basically what you said, Nketiah is not a dribbler, mostly a box striker, but works really hard, not very creative. I think Victor has a little bit of those creative elements, but again, he doesn't press, and he's not aerially strong. And he's so like, you are substituting one for the other. And if you are bringing in a striker at that price range, not sure you can live with like one or the other. I think you want a more wholesome package.
Mm-hmm. What I would really have liked to have seen with Gyökeres is for him to have gone to West Ham to take over that Michael Antonio role, which to me is a little bit of a wide guy, a little bit of a centre forward, a big physical threat, and to be honest, running into space a lot more than you're going to be able to playing for any of the top sides these days in the Premier League.
Yeah, no, I think anything below, and so my opinion about him will change, or my prognosis about him will change if you're talking about mid-table
Mm-hmm.
on teams. I think he's definitely going to add more value for them, because now you're at the point where you can't afford, or you can't aspire for a full package, and so you are now dealing with someone that has a few flaws, but you can work with what he's really good at. You want to maybe accentuate what he's really good at, and so at that point, I think I can see him a lot more. I would be a lot more comfortable. As you mentioned, West Ham, Michael Antonio. That's a great comp, or a great example.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the other thing about him is, I think I can't remember if it was Ted or Kim made the point that he didn't actually put a load of minutes in his legs as a young player.
Yeah.
So it's possible that he'll have a later peak than a lot of other forwards. On the other hand, he's coming into this next season off the back of 10,500 league minutes plus cups in the last 3 years. I mean, that's an awful lot of time on his feet.
Yeah, for sure. But I think going back to, obviously, I don't have his physical numbers, but like his accelerations and top speeds and those sort of things. But it doesn't seem like a forward that depends a lot on those aspects of the
Sure.
physicality. So these type of players probably tend to age more gracefully, because they are not dependent on those top end metrics in terms of physical metrics. So I'm not so worried about it. Just that I think I am aware that he is. I would make sure that I double, triple check in terms of like how good he is physically. Can he match up with the pace in the Premier League? Because looking at how his numbers kind of gone up from Championship to, because Championship is, I think, in terms of like demanding physically, I think after the Premier League, Championship is quite close to Premier League in not all the metrics, but a variety of metrics in terms of accelerations and high speed running. Portuguese League probably a little further down the list. So like it makes sense that he can really go, and I wouldn't say the game got easier for him in the Portuguese League, but on a day-to-day basis, on a 1v1 duel basis, he's probably facing lesser physical specimens. Whereas in the Premier League, he's going to probably face a lot of players that are above or are better than him physically. I think that's probably where I think my most concerns are.
Yeah, I get that as well. You'd want to at least see him really popping in like dribble success or something. So you were like, wow, okay, even if this guy loses 10% of this, he's still going to be. Whereas it's still kind of 50-50, and there are loads of carries into the penalty area, but there's also a lot of losing the ball, and you just kind of think
he turns the ball over a lot. And for a center forward of his type, I think that's pretty common, but that's not uncommon. But I do think he does, even for that position, just comparing with his peers, he does lose the ball a lot more than a lot of them.
Okay, well, we'll see where he ends up. But shall we move on to another player who's been excelling in green and white and is now also potentially making a move from a lower league, if I can say that without getting in trouble? We actually, we do have to fess up that we accidentally did a sort of Hibernian racism here, where I researched O'Brien and you researched O'Reilly. But I would like to hear about O'Reilly, because O'Reilly has been a little bit of a star of the transfer flow Slack so far this summer, and a star of preseason as well. And while everyone says preseason doesn't matter, sometimes preseason does make you dream. How are you feeling about O'Reilly?
I ended up actually, I didn't know it when I was watching, but I realized I watched him play against Chelsea in the friendly recently, somewhere here in the US. So I went back and watched some clips of that. Left-footed player, I think that he's not a number 6. He's more of an advanced midfield player, like I would say an 8 type player, but he is he's always taking very aggressive, advanced positions on the field, and I think I mentioned that up front because he's coming from Celtic. He plays for Celtic. I think in Celtic, even if you're playing double pivot and if your 8 takes always very high and advanced positions, you're probably okay. Just because of the opponents you're playing against most of the time. He's really good at pressing, so that kind of goes in hand with him being aggressive in terms of the positions he takes up on the field. That he's always high, he's pressing, so his pressing numbers are very high. But one issue there I saw is that when the ball turns over, when let's say Celtic's playing and he's pressing, or Celtic's driving forward with the ball turns over. A lot of clips I've seen, he's always recovering to backwards, to position, to defend or to track back. I feel like that's I think that's something you have to be aware of, like depending on how. So if you want to deploy him in a role where it's a two-way role, I don't know if he's a very good. He would be a good two-way player in the Premier League. I think you need to have a really locked down number 6 behind him so that he's going to help out. Not that he's never going to drop, but he will always be caught high. I think he will a lot of times he'll be caught higher up the field, and that to me is a little bit of a red flag for him in the Premier League. And then when I watched the clips in the preseason, obviously preseason doesn't matter all that. He's easy to beat on the duel or the tackle, in 1v1. Obviously, the matches I watched were Chelsea and a few clips from Man City versus Man City. So clearly, like we're really going up against some of the best players that he'll face in the league. But he didn't look good in those. And I think that to me is another area thinks that he's more of like he definitely has a creative part to him. He's really good at finding the runners with his diagonal passes, and also like he's good at moving off the ball and try to receive between the lines, and just kind of find pockets of space on the field, higher up to receive the ball in possession. I think in possession he has a lot of good qualities. My worry with him is that if he's going to move to a top tier team, that he will definitely be wanted in the other part of his game. He will be lacking on the other part of his game.
Okay.
So his defensive duels and defensive actions generally are, I would say, average to mediocre, if I'm comparing to a Premier League standard. So that's how I see him. So probably to me is like a mid-table, lower half Premier League, team could take a chance on him. I think he'll probably be good. He does have good like creative numbers at Celtic, but I always take those numbers with a little bit of a grain of salt coming. I think we all know that. I think coming from Scottish League.
So if you were to ask you a TED type question, if you were to compare him to a player, I mean, like to me, the way he's always described, and when you do see him, he feels quite Aaron Ramsey-ish to me.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great comparison. Like, I think there's a bit of a shuttler in him that, that he's not a 10. I think he's more of that. He's not quite an 8, but he can definitely move on the field, and but generally skewed towards the creative and the attacking side. I think in possession, he shows much better than out of possession.
And he's been rumored for a fee about 30 mil, I think. I mean, does that strike you as a fair price, or given the question marks around him and given the kind of level you think he'd be best at, is that overpriced in your opinion?
Maybe 30 million for him. He's 23 years old, so he's just coming into his prime. So maybe there is a little bit of growth left that he could grow into, depending on the setup he gets into. There is probably maybe a little higher level for him potential wise to take. I think maybe it's slightly overpriced, but if you have the right setup around him, and if you're convinced that adding him to the midfield is going to be an upgrade, I think that, obviously you pay the little bit of a premium. I think that's probably coming from the goals and assists he had last season at Celtic. And I looked at his Champions League numbers too, like just his Champions League. I think in Champions League, the where he really showed was a lot of pressing. I think those are the numbers where he really showed like he can be he can hang with the best. But beyond that, there wasn't a lot to see. Obviously, it's a smaller sample against Celtic, probably a pot 4 team or a pot 3 team going up against better teams in their group. Probably was a it's probably always going to play against better players. But yeah, I would say it's slightly overpriced. What do you think?
I mean, I don't think that the history is great for like paying that much for midfielders out of the Scottish League. It would probably not be my go-to. I don't know. I always feel that with Celtic, you can normally get these players for about 25 million. They're normally quite punchy with the fees they ask for straight up.
Yeah.
And I think that probably because what we're talking about is relatively specific, we're probably looking at a team which is a pressing but possession-orientated mid-table side, maybe like a Brighton type team. But Brighton have actually got a load of players who are already filling these roles. There's that smaller market to sell him to. So unless, like, I don't know, the thing is, like, at this price, you're not really going to get German clubs coming in who could also probably find a really good use for him, or a couple of the Italian teams you could imagine getting mileage out of him as well. It just feels like the price is really aimed at Premier League suitors, and the number of Premier League suitors.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's you have to look up maybe the promoted teams. Now the thing is, like if anyone beyond the top 5 or 6, or maybe top 8, if you're talking about like if you add a few more teams, include them. If they pay 25 to 30 million for a center midfielder, they want him to start 35 matches a season, or 38. I don't know, so that's where I feel that you need to have the right players around him to surround him with, and I think that if you have those right players, I think most importantly, like out of possession, how someone will cover for him, or like that 6 or maybe a center back being able to step into the space he leaves and before he returns back. I think that those are the things I would look at if I have those players, and I trust that his creative actions are going to get me X number of points per game. I think that's probably how I would arrive at that decision of signing him.
Okay. Well, it does seem like somebody's going to. I mean, the age, the price coming out of Celtic always manage to get the sales that they want. I just wonder who it's going to be. Okay. Shall we move on then to Chiesa? I almost said Enrico Chiesa then, which is really showing my age.
Yeah, for sure. I keep thinking about the name, and then I just remember Fiorentina, back in the day, with him. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, of the list of the players today, I would say this is my favorite player.
Definitely, I would agree.
Yeah.
I really love him, or I really loved him at Fiorentina when he was... That was quite a long time ago now, but that last season at Fiorentina when he was 21, 22... He got 16 goal involvements that season, and he was really difficult to hang with. I think it was him, and it was like 19-year-old Dusan Vlahovic as well, right?
Yeah.
And I think like guys like Kalinic hanging around too. And he had 6 shot assists per 90. So I mean, was just like putting up crazy shooting numbers from wide, and then had a really good first season at Juventus as well. So both those years, I think he was about 0.6 expected goals and expected assists per 90. Always loads of shots. And the progression stuff was pretty good as well. A couple of dribbles a game, really high success rate, great ball carrying, good progressive receptions. Just everything you kind of want to see in a of your creative type winger, more your kind of inside forward type winger, I guess.
Yeah.
And since then, it's been a bit of a tough period for him.
Yeah, I mean, Juve has been in a bit of a transition or a bit of a flux as well in the last few years. I think they've kind of played him all over the field, which is part of it. I think that no matter, I think they played him as that wide forward type role. or as a left wing. I've seen him play on the right side too. I mean, recently for Italy, and I feel like he's wasted on the right side. And I think his best, no matter where you play him, especially if you play him on the left side, he's going to end up on the left wing, dribbling inside into the box, into that half space. And that's where his best, magic happens. I think you want him to be in that space. I think if you want to take the maximum advantage of him, he has to operate in that area. So that's his thing. Like, I think that's a very, like, he's so dangerous from there. He can take shots, although I would say some of them probably are ill-advised. He does take a lot of shots. But he does create a lot from there. He is right-footed, but he's pretty adept at cutting back the ball with his left when he gets into that channel on the left side, inside channel, and then he can quickly kind of pass with his left foot across the goal, across the area, across the box. And those are really hard to defend because you know that he's right-footed. If you show him to his right, he's going to dribble past you and then try to shoot. But if you leave him and show him to his left, he's not too bad at cutting the ball back. So yeah, he's a very good player. I think that, and he's at 26, he's in his prime age. I think he would be for some team that needs that, as Kim pointed out in the write-up yesterday, he is just a plug and play. Like, there is no, like, he's ready. He can come in and contribute right away. I think that's another like a plus for him. And I think with 1 year left on his deal, it's probably, the price is not a big deal. I think Premier League teams can afford 25, 30 million if that's where Juve will cut the deal.
He sounds like a crazy price. I think that's so good. I mean, because if we talk about Spurs, for example, Spurs have been mooted for him. I think he make a lot of sense for them. He's a shot getting wide forward, and we've kind of seen under Ange Postecoglou that everyone gets numbers in that attack. Brennan Johnson got numbers in that attack last season, and I am on record as a bit of a Brennan Johnson hater. But you think about Premier League clubs who've been desperate for an excuse to sign someone like Pedro Neto at twice the price, who's actually got a significantly worse injury record. Like, obviously, we've got this ACL injury in the relatively recent past for Chiesa, but other than that, he's been very durable his whole career. Pretty much since the season he broke through, he's been a 30-plus appearance in the league guy. Even this last season, his first kind of full one back from injury, 0.5 expected goals and assists per 90, dribble success down a bit, but kind of the kind of thing where you can definitely see the upside.
Yep.
Yeah. And the price here.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about the number of players that, the amounts of money Chelsea spent in the last 2 seasons, signing players that are barely like proven. Sure, there is I'm sure there is the point of, well, they're signing for potential and, they could become, $100 million player type deal. But still, this is someone that can give you the production right now. And, 26, he's definitely got 3 good seasons at a very, very high level, if not more. I think this is a no-brainer for someone that wants a starter, that specific role of, like, he can be very creative from that left side, coming inside into the half space and then, or making the runs into the inside channel. He is. As far as the ACL, I think I mentioned this in a previous pod. We discussed this, is that ACLs are a very well-known thing now in terms of for surgeries and doctors. They know it inside out. In terms of recoveries, they're down to like weeks or days, saying it's going to be 185 days or a certain number of weeks before they kick the ball again. Like, the protocols are very, very well defined. So I won't be worried about an ACL, especially if he started playing, has come back and started playing after the injury.
So I think that this would make a lot of sense for Spurs. Like, generally speaking, my issue with Spurs has been, do you sign? I kind of want to sign younger players generally, because I don't want to sign this guy and 3 years later have to replace him once I build up the rest of the squad. However, the price is so good here, and I think re-upping Son on a long-term deal is such a bad idea that that it makes a lot of sense for me to just go and do this, especially if you could turn around someone like Richarlison and send him off to Saudi Arabia, which seems to be something kind of everyone wants, except possibly Richarlison. It remains to be seen. But
yes,
wages, I think, will be quite healthy.
Yeah, I think wages will be high, but I think that you are looking at, I think that there is, wages will be high, or like as a established Premier League starter for a top level team. I think that would be his wages. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would love to see this happen because I do think that Juventus depress some of their attackers' numbers, or have done recently. I could see him definitely in a team that's more aggressive, and where he's left higher up the pitch and where he's encouraged to get those shots from wide, and he's not. Though his defensive work rate has been pretty good his whole career, I don't want him doing wing back stuff. I don't really want him playing in a front two.
Yeah.
I want him doing the thing he's good at, and I think he could be great.
I think even when he puts him as like a 3-5-2 as a front two thing, the first thing he does is just flare out wide left, and then that's what he does. Like a lot of times, players are who they are, especially at that age, 26. Like you're not changing them that much. Like you are going to get what you're going to get, and you just have to find. I think that's probably the biggest job of a lot of the big time coaches is try to find players to play in their best spots. And I think that with Federico, I think we know. I think it's very clear what his best spots are and what his best type of movements are. I was looking at while you were talking about him. I was looking up. Spurs signed Alejo Vélez last year, a young player from Argentina for 15 million,
and he got 0 minutes on loan, right?
Exactly. And this is where I say is that if you are a team that are expected to be in the Europa League or in the Champions League, you can have some young players, but you also need players that can contribute now, because you can't say, "Oh, I'm going to field 6 youngsters in the team, or 6 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds. All of them will grow together, and 2 years from now we'll have a great team." I don't think that works well. I don't think that logic works well. So for me, like if you paid 15 for him and he hasn't played on his loan in Sevilla either. So you're talking about, okay, this is obviously the salary is going to be much higher. It's not apples to apples comparison, but just to give an example.
Well, I think it's fair to say that we're all devotees of Chiesa. Which actually, now I think about it, that's a pun, because I think does Chiesa not mean church in Italian? Anyway, somebody let me know if that's correct. It might not be. But I think it would be great to see him in the Premier League. I think that seeing this particular kind of brand of aggressive, exciting, very direct player, it'd be nice to see. Shall we move on to another player then? Because we've got an even bigger name. Who is meant to be coming out of Italy too, but it's not quite materializing yet. This is Victor Osimhen, obviously now one of the biggest names on the market, has done something. He did something historic with Napoli, and also was excellent while doing it. And he has a background as a good goal scorer in France and in Belgium, but now linked to Chelsea and linked to PSG at a really eye-watering figure. Why do you think this hasn't quite gone through yet? Because we all like him.
Yeah. Again, I think this is one, when players like this pop up at the team after being there for a couple of years, and they just have these really good numbers, one of two things is true. One is that they are obviously very, very good. I think that's very good. And two, which is maybe overlooked a bit, is that because he grew organically with a certain team, they figured out roles of players around him, and just to say, well, this is what he's really good at. So we're going to have everybody else work towards it, because he's going to score goals. He's going to score 25 goals for us. We're going to put the team around him. I think when you take that player and put him into another team where this organic growth hasn't happened, now you have to think about how does he fit in our squad. And And maybe there are some things like that. Like if you look at his his best skills, he's very speedy, very vertical. He can make runs from the deep. He can do. He's so athletic that he can receive like a long ball from the keeper around midfield, lay it off to someone, then go on a long sprint and receive kind of a return ball from a winger or from an attacking midfielder. He can do stuff like that.
Yeah.
So and he has really good off the ball movement where he can make those runs and make that space and be at the receiving end of the ball. But he's not a really good passer. Like what comes up with him is that he doesn't really once he's in his stride, he gets the ball. You want him to just finish the possession. Like you don't want him to prolong the possession, because I think that usually means he's going to lose the ball. If you look at soccer as just a series of possessions, or football as a series of possessions, there are players you want in different parts of that possession, different stages of that possession, like the build-up. Then there is kind of where you're elaborating your game in the midfield. And then there is the final third where you're initiating your attacking movements. And then you're finishing the play. This is the one, when you pass the ball to him, you want him to be the one that finishes that possession. Sure. Or he'll lose the ball. He'll lose the possession finishes anyway. So, and he's also the type where he doesn't really touch the ball as much as like a lot of modern forwards. You want them to touch, where check back and show to receive the ball and then lay off and go back. I don't think he's that type. He's more of a vertical runner. You always want to spring him into space. So if you are like, we're talking about, say, PSG, Luis Enrique, I think he's more of he wants a little bit more volume of in Spanish they call volumen de juego. It's more that he wants him to participate more in the play. In the final third, he wants to be more participative, to be more combinative. I think that's probably one aspect where he doesn't grade out very well. So I see that could be like, for the top teams when they're thinking about him, that could be one big criteria that they're saying, well, I don't know how he would fit. We might have to change how we've put together the rest of the team to take the best advantage of him, to take his best qualities, to get the best qualities of his into play.
Sure.
The other thing, I think he's now linked with Chelsea in some sort of a loan deal with swap of Lukaku going the other way. Anyway, so without going into all that, I think with Chelsea, like I'm thinking about it, how different is he from Nicolas Jackson, who they got last year? Similar type of runner, like vertical player. I think Nicolas Jackson actually has a little bit more of combinative skills. I watched him quite a bit when he was at Villarreal, and he's definitely he has some similarities with Victor in terms of the style, the way they are more vertical forwards. So, and I thought he had a good season, especially with Chelsea in a sort of, a lot of new players being bedded in at the same time. So, even in that inconsistent type environment, I thought Nicolas Jackson did pretty well last season. So Victor would be better finisher than him. There is no doubt. I think he's more experienced and all that. I'm not going to deny that. But if you're bringing him in, like, I feel like there's a similar player already there, so maybe he will go to the bench. Yeah. So I think those would be my question. Those would be the reasons why probably he hasn't moved. Now there is a third one. This is just mostly my opinion. Is that I may be completely wrong here. I think Napoli is pretty hard to negotiate with.
Yeah.
And that probably put off a lot of the teams. Also, is that, if they ask for a lot of money and negotiations are hard, teams probably just didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah, I wondered if they'd maybe change that mindset a little bit after there was a point a few years ago where they could have probably got really close to 9 figures for Kalidou Koulibaly, and because they held strong, they ended up getting, I think it was 38, something like that for him, which actually, as it turned out, was pretty good money for the player he was at that stage. But I wondered if they'd soften, but I don't know. I think it's always a nightmare to deal with De Laurentiis. and then there's the other part of it, which we haven't even touched on, which is the injury situation.
Mm-hmm.
Since he's been at Napoli, he's now been 4 years at Napoli. He's played 59% of available minutes. And I understand that when you watch highlights or whatever, when people talk about him online, they want to imagine that Victor Osimhen is his ability, his on-field ability. But players aren't just their on-field ability; they're also their injury records, right? And the injury record is pretty appalling. And you also just wonder if it's a part. It might just be part of who he is as a guy, but it also might be part of who he is as a player, because so much like high acceleration, so much intensity, very direct. It's just going to happen.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with that. I think those two go with the territory hand in hand. I think the more you depend on top end accelerations and high speed running or like top end sprinting, you're probably are more prone to injuries as well. And if a team is going to have to shell out 70 million or 60 million, whatever it is for him, 59% availability is probably a big red flag to think about.
Yeah. If you were looking at that sort of price, this is putting you on the spot a bit, but who else would be kind of in the conversation? Because this is the thing, right? When we're looking at elite centre forwards, that money doesn't get you Alexander Isak. I don't know what it would cost to get you someone like Lautaro Martinez, but that also would probably be 9 figures in that zone.
Yeah.
Who else is in this area?
Yeah, not many that I can think of off the top of my head. I think that maybe, we talked about, different profile, but we talked about Viktor Gyökeres earlier. Yeah. Again, another number 9 with a completely different profile. But again, like there is not that many that are at that high level so maybe that's the reason there's a scarcity and, price is being driven up by that. So,
the worry with Chelsea too is that I just don't know how they do this. Like we aren't that far away from existential threat with Chelsea. I think everybody in football kind of has this attitude of that will never happen. But you look at Chelsea's books, and it's something like 50 mil amortized every season before you even get to any new business they do. I just don't know how they could do this. I guess at a certain point you're in the hole and you're like, well, we might as well dig and see if we can get through to the other side of the earth because the hole's so deep. But
that's. I look at their squad and I just go, well, what is going on here? Like they have to move so many players out. It's just not. Even if you have so many players, it's hard to even like. If you like, there are certain numbers in terms of like players that the group, and they're all like teams, coaches like 24 players, 25 players type squads, and there are reasons for that because there's a couple guys always injured, but they generally tend to want like 22 players roughly, just so that they can play. Like it's just a sort of where they can easily break them in training and like numbers in training. Sure. And sometimes like having, with injuries, sometimes you have fewer players, then you bring in players from the second team or the academy to make numbers up in training. But the real problem is if you have too many, like, and all of them, if a lot of them if you have 30 first team players with first team contracts, outfield players, then you can't break them into groups enough, like, in training, because it can't be realistic anymore, training. So that's another problem. I'm sure coaches at Chelsea probably face this. Obviously what they could do is that, well, I don't count X, Y, and Z, so I don't need them here. They can go train with the second team. But it's not as simple for players that are making tons of money on first team contracts to move them and go train with the second team. So there's a lot more than just like, okay, it's a money thing, but it's also like a logistics thing in day-to-day trainings.
Yeah, they're at the point now as well where, like, in addition to having their football teams, they've got kind of like a handball team on the side. They've signed an 8th keeper. Is that right?
Yeah, they've signed an 8th keeper, and that's And you look at him. There are some reviews on him. I think there's someone I know, Kieran Doyle. He makes good reviews. He's a big Chelsea fan. He has a review of Jorgensen, who was at Villarreal. I watched him a lot last season. I don't see. I mean, it's not that he's a good goalkeeper. I think he will do well. At the top level, he's done well at Villarreal, at least in the second half of last season, and he's only 22, so he still has for a goalkeeper. 22 is pretty young, but he's not something that's like the next biggest thing. I don't think he's gonna become that like a Courtois or someone like that's gonna transcend probably like 5 years, 10 years, a decade as one of the elite keepers in the world. Like, I don't think he has that potential. Especially if that is the case, then if you already have 6 or 7 on your books, then why do you get an 8th one, right? That's just I just don't understand, how they are. I guess we'll see. We're still, today is July 30th, and we have 1 month of the window. So maybe by August 31st, they would kind of come down to a nice 24 outfield player squad. We'll see that.
I'll be impressed if they do bring that off. But yeah, I think that pretty much wraps us for today. Thank you, Ravi. That was really, really interesting. Loads of big players who could go to a bunch of places. It'd be fascinating to kind of if some of these guys get these moves, then we can kind of assess them mid-season and see where we were right and where we were wrong.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with the Chelsea Osimhen bit, I think the fact that they're thinking of moving Lukaku and maybe potentially 1 or 2 other players, that may not be, in that sense, it's probably a good thing. Maybe not as a profile fit, even if it is not a great fit as a profile. I think my only concern is that they already have Nico Jackson there. So how is that going to, because they paid 40 million for him last year. So, and he's done well. He has done well. He has done well. So I think that, if their rationale is, hey, we're going to get a really good player, we could have, on a loan, it won't cost as much. At the same time, we're moving a couple of bad contracts or we're started the process of pruning this roster, and this will be a step in that direction. I think that's a great. I would say that's a great move if they can pull that off.
Great. Well, I think that brings us to a close for today. Thank you very much, all of you who've sent us questions in on Twitter, on YouTube. If you've enjoyed this, please do subscribe to us on YouTube, where this goes out as a video podcast. If you're listening on a podcast app, then please leave us a review. That's really, really helpful as well, and 5 stars if you feel like it. There's more great content coming out in the newsletter every single day. I really recommend it if you want to be up to date this off season. And thank you very much again, Ravi, for giving me lots of expert opinion to chew over today.
No, thanks for the conversation as always, Patrick. And they're looking forward to. I mean, it feels like it's been forever in the transfer season, and we have the biggest month left to start. This is like August. We still have 1 more day to go in July, and I think it will be We'll see like where all these rosters and squads look like by the end of August.
Yeah, and then Ted's going on holiday, Ravi, so it's just going to be you and me to mop all this nonsense.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.